minutes. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks, Ollie. What a shock. French workers don't like tourists very much. Wow. And in other groundbreaking news, it's raining in Salford. Love that story about the French workers at the Louvre Museum not liking the tourists. Wow. How you doing, by the way? Welcome to Wednesday's Richie Allen Show. Jesus, that was loud. Welcome to the programme.
Richie Allen.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, I've known David Noakes for many, many years. He used to come on my show back in my days in España to talk about the European Union. He ran a website which was a critique of the European Union and where it's all going and all of that. I'm talking about David Noakes, of course. Now, David was just released from prison very recently after serving 6 months of a sentence, having been convicted of 4 charges relating to the manufacture, the sale and the supply of an unlicensed medicine. I'm talking, of course, about GC MAF, which is not a chemical medicine. It's a naturally occurring human protein, and many people believe that GC MAF is a wonder cure for many things. Now, I spoke with David just before he was sentenced last year on the programme. We got into it about GC MAF and his company, Immunobiotech. We'll have a chat again with David today. We'll talk to him about his release. We'll talk about where he goes from here, and we'll get into GC MAF again. Comments and questions for him or for me, direct them to Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter, at Richie Allen Show. It's Wednesday's programme, live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester. I'm in Salford on triggerwarning.tv, my own website. The programme is on tunein.com, TuneIn Radio, the app as well. And all is good and all is well, except it's raining. Datsun Cogs. Love the old gags. Cats and dogs in Salford this afternoon. Righty-o. Shall we dive straight into the news? Before we do that, thanks for joining in with that live stream this morning at 9:30. I'm going to do this, and just for the next couple of days, I'm going to keep mentioning it, even though I know you're not stupid, but new people joining all the time. The Richie Allen Radio Show is the Richie Allen Radio Show. You're listening to it, and it will continue as such, hopefully for many a year. Or maybe hopefully not for many a year. Maybe there'll be a civic or a civil revolution and we won't need programs like this. And I mean that. But it will continue. But I'm going to, for 30 minutes each morning, I'm going to curtail it. It's gone on for a bit the last couple of mornings. But for 30 minutes at 9:30, so between 9:30 and 10 UK time, I'm going to talk about the headlines in the UK papers. That's Monday to Friday. All right? I think it'll be an interesting feature, and it's a nice development for the Richie Allen Show. I am aware of your interests, and more than one listener has said to me over time, we like the video stuff because we feel it's more interactive. That's fine, so we'll do that 9:30 Monday to Friday. So if you missed it, it's on YouTube, and if you want to participate, join in at 9:30 tomorrow. Alrighty. Little bit of news around Donald Trump. You might have seen this a short time ago, around about an hour ago in fact. US Special Counsel Robert Mueller addressed the media at the Department of Justice, and he said that charging President Donald Trump with a crime wasn't an option. So he's given his very first comments on the Russia inquiry. He didn't rule out giving evidence to Congress in DC, but he said he would not give any information that wasn't in his report. Now, Mueller, as you know, concluded there was no collusion even between Russia and the Trump campaign, but he didn't exonerate the president of obstruction of justice. And if you want to hear a smidgen of this, because I was told lately that the programme is very UK-centric of late, and I take that criticism on board. I try to do as much global news as I can. But you're right, it has been a bit UK-centric because of Brexit. So here's Robert Mueller addressing the public in his first full statement. He didn't exonerate Trump, but stopped short of it. So Trump's fans and his enemies are claiming some sort of victory today. Here's Robert Mueller today. Here he is.
2 years ago, the acting Attorney General asked me to serve as special counsel, and he created the special counsel's office. The appointment order directed the office to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. This included investigating any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Now, I have not...
Tell you what I'll do, I'll cut that short. I didn't realise I'd loaded the entire statement, because I can be a bit of an arse like that, you know. So, I've got a snip. Hang on a second. Hang on there, Robert. Hang on. Hang on now. Kind of car crash there, isn't it? Isn't that car crash radio, or the very definition of it? Right, here is a snippet where he's talking about, where he says, if we had confidence that Trump clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. Like I said, Trump's fans saying he's exonerated, but Trump's critics saying, well, not so. Have a listen to what Mueller says here.
And as set forth in the report after that investigation.
You couldn't make this up, could you? Let's try that again. Oh, God be with the days when I first started out in this business. Let's listen again.
And as set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the Volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited.
Yeah, there you go. That's the basics of it. And CNN and other networks not friendly with Trump are running that clip over and over again, saying that, well, it proves that Mueller is saying that they weren't entirely confident that Trump didn't commit a crime and all that jazz. It's pure theatre. It matters not. But it's obviously very popular right now, and it's trending on Twitter and Facebook and all the rest of it. Here in the UK, the former Foreign Secretary and the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, has been ordered to appear in court over claims that he lied by saying the UK gave the EU £350 million a week. He's been accused of misconduct in public office after making this claim repeatedly during the referendum campaign prior to the vote in 2016. A lot of them are saying it, that if we leave, we can stop giving the EU 350 mil a week and give it to the NHS. I never believed, of course, whatever the case may be regarding the money, that they would give it to the NHS. These are people who want to privatise the NHS, of course. Don't believe Bojo and Nigel and all the rest of them. So this is a private prosecution. It's been launched by a guy called Marcus Ball. He crowdfunded 200 grand for the case, my God. Johnson's representatives have said this is a stunt brought for political purposes. The preliminary hearing will take place at Westminster Magistrates Court, and it will then be sent to the Crown Court for trial. Bad timing for Bojo. Now, this £350 million figure was used a lot by the pro-Brexit Vote Leave group back in the day, 3 years ago, right? And it was on the big red bus, do you remember? Calling for the UK to fund our NHS as well. Now, to support Johnson, the Office for National Statistics says the UK's gross contribution to the European Union totalled £18.9 billion in 2016, which is approximately $363 million a week. But that sum was reduced to $13.9 billion, which works out at £267 million a week after the application of the rebate won by Margaret Thatcher. So this is the rebate. So the net contribution is £267 million a week because there's a rebate which is applied before the UK's contribution is sent to the European Union. So they're saying that Johnson told lies and this is misconduct in public office and he has to be prosecuted for this. It's a bit of nonsense, really, but we might return to it tomorrow or later in the week because the implications of it are quite interesting for free speech and for conjecture and for your interpretation of things, you know, in terms of how Johnson interpreted the money being sent to the European Union. So it's kind of interesting. We might pick it up a bit later on in the week or on another programme. Now, John Cleese of Fawlty Towers and Monty Python fame has been criticised today for saying that London is no longer an English city. I'd like you to pay a bit of attention to this, particularly the wording of all of this, right? Cleese says London is no longer an English city, and he's getting criticised for that. In fact, he said it back in 2011, but he's saying it again. He tweeted, did John Cleese, he's nearly 80 now, would you believe it? He's getting on, that his friends abroad agreed with his observation that London is no longer English. So he said there must be some truth in this. The actor described London, where nearly 60% voted in favour of remaining in the EU, as, quote, the UK city that voted most strongly to remain in the EU. He announced last year he was moving to the Caribbean because he was disappointed with Britain. So they're coming out of the woodwork to call him racist, including professors from Northumbria University and EU rights campaigners, calling him a hypocrite, calling him a racist. Kuba Jablonski, I'm brutal, me. Kuba Jablonowski is a social science researcher based in Bristol, and he said he was quite shocked when he saw the tweet. I'm shocked that John Cleese would say London is not English any longer. And Dom Joly, who's a fellow comedian, a peer, I suppose. Dom Joly is a British comedian. He was quick to criticise the tweet as well, saying John Cleese is one of my comedy heroes. Suddenly, this thing came out of nowhere, and it's so depressing on so many levels. Jolie said he's clearly a really smart, funny man, but it is basically a very racist tweet. Secondly, it's a racist tweet by a man who lives on a Caribbean island. The irony of that is insane. Even the language is insane. Who uses the word opine? Well, somebody with an education, maybe Dom. Opine is an English word after all. So he's a racist, John Cleese. This is a very interesting, again, pay attention to the language. The reaction to Cleese and his tweet is very interesting. Here's LBC Radio, and the host is a guy called Majid Nawaz, and he's a former head of Quilliam. Quilliam is a counter-extremism think tank, and Majid Nawaz is a British Pakistani who used to head Quilliam. So he's a British Pakistani. Now he's a radio host, and I've talked about this before. It's quite crazy. LBC is full of presenters who have worked or do work in politics or for lobby groups. There isn't a journalist among the presenters at LBC. Really. This is how radio has changed, and I've talked about this. So he's talking about John Cleese's comments, and a caller from Romford phoned in, a guy called Mark. Now Mark makes a point. Mark says things have changed demographically, and maybe John Cleese has seen those changes, and that's what he's reacting to. Mark feels this is the point Cleese is clearly making. Have a listen to the exchange between the caller and the presenter.
John Cleese has probably come from a time where the demographics of where he's come from might have changed a lot over the time, as of a lot of areas that I've moved from. People are going to have different opinions. New people come to the area are not going to have the same opinion as someone.
Let me ask you this, Mark. Let me ask you this. If it's about opinions, then let's see which is the correct opinion and which is an opinion which is perhaps slightly bigoted. If 44.9% of London is white British, that doesn't include me, right? If you add people like me who were born and raised here, then clearly that's more than 5% in London, right? So clearly London is majority British.
Majid Nawaz, the presenter, keeps using the term British here. Now, I can distinguish between British and English, and I'm pretty sure you, dear listener of mine, I'm pretty sure you can as well. And this is classic obfuscation, muddying the waters, and destroying the debate by the mainstream media. Cleese said London is no longer English. Now, as an educated man, I believe that Cleese understands when he says English. He understands that he's not saying British. He's not saying citizen. He's saying English. But the presenter here is doing a great job of actually trying to confuse what John Cleese said, whether you agree with Cleese or not.
Right.
And therefore, majority English.
Yep.
So, what part of John Cleese's comment isn't ignorant and bigoted if he's suggesting London is no longer an English city? I mean, the only way you can come to that conclusion is if you exclude all the non-white Londoners from your definition of English people.
Right. It depends on the context that John Cleese meant it. He might not have meant it in the way that I think you're interpreting it, or the way that you feel.
How do you interpret what he says? He says, you tell me your spin on it. He says, some years ago I opined, meaning I kind of thought about the fact that London was not really an English city anymore. Since then, virtually all my friends from abroad have confirmed my observation, so there must be some truth to it. What do you think he means by saying London's not really an English city anymore?
I would think there's an aspect of a whiteness to it. I do think that's an aspect of what he's saying, and there's also a truth to that.
What's the truth to that? Am I less? So, Mark, to ask you again directly.
You just asked me, and you ain't even given me 1 second. And you think,
well, I've given you more than 1 second, Mark. Am I less British or English than you?
Am I less British or English than you? Says the presenter Rashid Nawaz. Now, he would describe himself as a British Pakistani. Would he describe himself as English? We'll come back to that in a second.
You?
No, you're the same.
Right, so what do you mean there's an aspect of whiteness to it?
You're the same, says Mark from Romford. Now, maybe John Cleese doesn't think that Rashid Nawaz is English. There's a thought for you. Hold on to that. So the presenter, a British Pakistani, wouldn't allow the caller expand and asked the caller, am I less British or English than you? Well, of course he's a British citizen. He's a subject, actually. But that's for another day, right? Yeah, that's for another day. Now, nobody I know would deny his British citizenship. He'd be a moron. He was born and bred here. Born and reared here. And he belongs here as much as anybody. The presenter. He really does. I believe that. But is he English? Would he consider himself to be English? I don't believe he is, no matter where he was born. So Mark, again, the caller, says, look, the landscape has changed dramatically over the years. The ethnic makeup of London. That's John Cleese's point, but the presenter won't have any of it. And frantically scrambling behind the scenes are producers shouting in the earpiece of the presenter, because Mark is making a bit of sense in analysing what John Cleese is getting at, but we can't have that.
If you look, for example, at the East End of London, over the last 20, 30 years, it's changed dramatically, where it's gone from predominantly white to definitely minority white. So that could well be what John Cleese has meant, and that's a fact.
Mark,
Mark,
you don't get away with this.
You don't get away with what? Let's suppose Mark is right. I don't know. Couldn't figure it out today. Are white people now a minority in London? And by the way, I couldn't give a shite as an Irishman, right? Are they? If that is true, is that what Cleese was getting at? If Cleese looks at people from the Middle East, if he looks at people from parts of Africa and doesn't see them as English, whether they were born in the UK or not, doesn't see them as English fundamentally. The presenter says you're not getting away with this. Getting away with what? I'm trying to explain where Cleese is coming from.
Mark, you have said changed. That's not what John Cleese said. What you have not said is that makes them less British, which is what John Cleese has said.
No, he didn't. And you see, if I was John Cleese now, I would sue LBC for libel. This guy, Rashid Nawaz, who used to work for the Quilliam Foundation, this kind of anti-Muslim, they say anti-extremism think tank. But this guy is a lobbyist who's now working on national radio. This is what's happened to the media in this country. And he's there to muddy the waters, and he's there to libel people in their absence. Cleese didn't say that people are any less British because they're not English. Never said anything of the sort. He said, London is no longer an English city. That's exactly what he said. And that's all he said. Whether he's right or wrong, I leave up to you, dear listener. I don't tell you what to think.
It's less English, right? Now, unless you're going to say, yes, the definition of being either British or English is you must be white, then you're not backing up what he's saying. So you've got to decide where you stand on this, Mark. Yes, I agree with you.
Now he's threatening the caller.
With you, the East End of London has changed.
Well, you don't have to be white to be British.
The word changed.
You definitely do not have to be white to be British. Of course not. Absolutely not. Right? Good point.
Doesn't mean the word English, right? So you're saying changed. He's saying less English. Which one is it?
Well, I'm not John Cleese. I can't tell you, but I would have thought he means not. I don't think he means it in a racist way. He's saying that it's changed where it's like, white is what I think he means. If that's the honest opinion, I think that's what he's saying.
Right. So if you use the word white with British or English synonymously, it means you're excluding non-white people from that definition, which is ignorant.
John Cleese hasn't done anything of the sort. He said London is no longer an English city. That's what he said. Whether he's right or wrong, again, I leave up to you.
Correct.
Well, if John Cleese, I understand the point you're making, but if John Cleese is come from a place there that was predominantly white, and then over the time, even if they are now white, they are British-born people there, that the demographic has changed so much, I think he's turning around and saying that it doesn't seem as if it's British country anymore, whether them people are British or not.
Yeah, which is what the definition of ignorance and bigoted comments are, Mark. If you exclude from your definition of citizens of this country people that aren't white, then by definition you're making a comment that is bigoted.
Majid Nawaz is a lawyer, and he's libelled John Cleese because John Cleese has not said that he excludes non-whites as British citizens. This is the whoring fucking UK media in full glare. Lie, muddy the waters, misrepresent what's actually being said, because there's a danger that there's a real debate to be had where people can express what it is they really think about themselves and their identity and the identity of others. We can't have that. So then the presenter, Nawaz, practically bullies the caller into acquiescing by saying you can't think this way, or even apologise for it, or make an excuse for Cleese, because that basically makes you a bigot as well.
But you can't pretend it's not bigoted if Mark, you agree with the notion that a citizen is an equal citizen if they're a citizen, regardless of skin colour.
Yeah, if they're born here, yeah.
Yes, which is you and me.
Yeah, I know, I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing with that whatsoever.
Right, so you can't use the word white and British or English synonymously then, can you?
Well, that's how he's using it. I mean,
which is wrong then, isn't it, Mark, according to you?
What do you mean, according to me?
Because you used the word changed. You didn't use the word English or British. So you phrased it correctly.
The correct way or the wrong way?
You phrased it correctly. You said the East End has changed, which it has. Yeah. You'd have to be blind not to see that, right?
No, definitely, yeah.
Right, but you didn't say the East End is no longer British or English.
Okay, so maybe he's worded it wrong then. Maybe he really does mean it the way he said it.
Well, maybe he really does mean it the way that he said it. Browbeaten and bullied by the presenter, because the presenter created a scenario for the caller that if you're making a case for John Cleese, well, you're a bit of a bigot as well. These are extraordinary times. Woeful fare on national radio today. Mark caved in. The water is well and truly muddied. You've got no chance of a grown-up discussion on national identity. I know Pakistanis who've been born in the UK who are third generation. Their parents were born here. No people I've gone to watch cricket with, people I've lived next door to in my 2 incarnations in Manchester. Libyans that I've known who are devout Muslims. And I've asked them over a cup of tea over the years about identity. I've asked them, I really have. Born and raised in the UK, I've said, what are you? And they said, well, we're British Pakistanis. And I said, are you English? And they said, no way. Right. Fair enough. But Cleese looking at ethnic groups from Asia primarily, and Africa maybe, I'm guessing those are the groups he looks at. And not recognising them as English is a thought crime. We've got to shut it down. We can't debate it. Because if we do, we might start to wonder, how has it come to pass that in many cities, white people have become less prominent, less visible, shall we say, in communities? How has that happened? And what has it done to people? What has it done to relationships in communities? What has it done to people? I remember talking on this radio programme about spending a lot of time in Brent, in Wembley, during the People's Voice, and speaking to old white people whom were not shy about giving out dogs abuse about what happened in their neighbourhood, which changed dramatically over 20, 25 years with an influx of people from all over the place, from Somalia, from other parts of Africa, from North Africa, and from the Middle East, and saying, well, this is not how we recognise our city or our country. And they feel that, and they want to talk about that, but they can't, because if they do, they are called racist, bigoted, they are marginalised, made to feel disgusting for even having raised the point to begin with. And you heard that again on LBC Radio today. Is John Cleese a racist? I haven't a Scooby-Doo. I've no idea. But I'd like to ask listeners of this programme who come from the Middle East, who come from a Pakistani background or an African background, maybe your parents or your grandparents come from Africa maybe. You're a British citizen, obviously. You're here, rightfully, as much as anybody else. I'm not. I'm Irish. I'm not a British citizen. Do you identify as English, and do you make a distinction between British and English, as John Cleese seemingly does? I think it's interesting anyway. That was LBC Radio today. Just before we welcome David Noakes back to the programme, it was a bad day for the media, really. Kay Burley, who presents the mid-afternoon programme on Sky News, interviewed Andrew Mitchell today. He's a Parry Andrew Mitchell, but we know him as Andrew Mitchell. He's a peer, which means he's a fat arse who attends the House of Lords and snores and farts his way through the afternoons for £300 a day. He left the Labour Party back in September 2016, and he was on Sky to bash Labour over expelling Alastair Campbell, and also to talk about anti-Semitism. Burley said to Mitchell, Lord Mitchell, Burley said, well, Campbell admitted he voted Lib Dem, so why complain about his expulsion?
I mean, he's been a very instrumental force within the Labour movement for a long, long time. So this was not an easy decision for him. And by the way, he didn't make his announcement until after the polls closed the other day. You know, you have to think of one thing. Jeremy Corbyn, throughout his backbench career, voted against the Labour government and opposition over 500 times, but he was allowed to stay within the Labour Party because diversity of view. Alastair does this one decision, and makes this one statement, and within 2 days he's kicked out of the party. I mean, what has Labour become?
What has Labour become, indeed? I can't believe he wasn't kicked out of the party after the sexed up Iraq weapons dossier, which I mentioned yesterday. They kicked him out for voting Lib Dem. And much as I despise the likes of Lord Mitchell, and I properly do despise him and his ilk, he's making an interesting point, isn't he?
It's just totally awful.
It's dreadful.
Incorrect to have
Now, Burley is rubbish, right? Burley is supposed to play the devil's advocate and at least put a couple of counterpoints to Mitchell. But Burley jumps in and starts agreeing with him and editorialising. And Burley says, is it right that Campbell is thrown out while people found guilty of anti-Semitism are still in?
Expelled him from the party. Expelled him from the party.
Yeah, she asks that question in a minute. So anyway, is it right to have expelled him?
It's totally incorrect to have expelled him from the party. I mean, he's not against Labour. He just said in this particular election he couldn't go with Labour, and he voted with the Lib Dems. It's hardly a hanging offence, is it?
On the contrary, those who are accused of alleged anti-Semitism seem to linger longer within your former party.
Well, they more than linger longer. I mean, many of them are just there and will be there forever. I mean, on a slightly related subject, just take the case of Jess Phillips and the fact that, she has had people threatening her with murder, been other people in her constituency who are Holocaust deniers, and they have just been suspended. And it's taken ages for this to happen. It seems to me very, very clear that Labour will act with amazing speed when it's somebody who attacks them. But if it's something like anti-Semitism or Holocaust denial or something like that, they will linger longer, as you so aptly put it.
Who's denied the Holocaust in the Labour Party? Not any MP, certainly. Not any member of any local authority, certainly. I can't find any example of any, prominent Labour member denying the Holocaust. This is just nonsense, isn't it?
He put it.
They now find themselves as a party under investigation for alleged anti-Semitism on some levels by some sections of the party. The last political party that found itself in this position was the BNP. Yeah,
that's journalism in 2019. Rather than challenge Lord Mitchell on any of the points he made, put the other side to him, Burley goes along with it, says it seems that you can get expelled for voting Lib Dem, but if you say things about Jews, you get to stay in. And then Burley compares the party to the BNP. Dreadful stuff, isn't it? 25 minutes to the top of the hour. There was plenty more to get into, but I want to leave it there and introduce my guest. It's my only guest today. I'm going to dial him up, and while I do that, I'll tell you a little bit about him in case you haven't heard about him before. Now, he began speaking on programmes presented by me back in 2010. I used to bring him on a programme that I was presenting in Spain. He used to come on to talk to me about the European Union because he had a prominent website at the time, which was a kind of a go-to place to find out what the European Union is really all about. This fascist dictatorship, this, ever more powerful organisation, depleting national sovereignty and all of that. And he used to come on to talk to me about the European Union. Now, in recent years, he was involved in a company called Immunobiotech, which manufactured a product called GC-MAF. And he came to national attention last year when he was sentenced to 6 months in prison. Well, he was sentenced to more than that, actually, but he served 6 months in prison when he was convicted of 4 charges relating to the manufacture, sale and supply of an unlicensed medicine. And we spoke to him just before he was sentenced. He came on the programme and he knew that it was looking bad, that he was going to go to prison. GC-MAF is not a chemical product. It is derived from human protein called GC protein-derived macrophage activating factor, or GC-MAF for short. And many people around the world believe that GC-MAF is and has shown remarkable results in treating various illnesses and sicknesses. Now, the judge, in summing up the case, said of my guest David Noakes that GC-MAF itself wasn't on trial. The judge, Nicholas Lorraine Smith, did say that he believed David had acted out of a genuine desire to treat people, which I think probably meant a lot to David Noakes hearing that, despite the predicament he found himself in. The judge did say, though, that he showed a reckless disregard for the regulatory regime and had sold the product to vulnerable people, and the fact it was freely available was horrifying. He's out of prison, I'm glad to say. Let's welcome back to the programme David Noakes. David, welcome back. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Hello, Richie. Well, I'm one-third the man I was. I'm quite weak.
That's a whole other issue, isn't it? Because I've been reading in the national press that you talked about the conditions in prison. But ironically, we talk a lot on this programme about the privatisation of prisons in the UK and what that means for prisoners in terms of the care they receive in prison. We might talk a bit about that later on. So it was a bad time for you. You're out now. But it isn't over in terms of the legal situation that you're facing, because I understand in Europe and in France they want to put you on trial for selling this product as well. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, I mean, GCMAF, if put in the NHS, will save 120,000 lives a year. It is the cure for cancer the world's been waiting for. And it was discovered by scientists in the human body in the 1980s. GCMAF is a safe, natural human protein and therefore a human right. And all you people who thought the treatment for cancer was in the human body all along were absolutely correct. So how did it get to be concealed for 25 years? Well, very simply, it's all Parliament's fault. Parliament gave the control of the medicines laws to the $1.3 trillion pharmaceutical companies. Altogether, they are as big as half of England. And they wrote the medicines laws. Absolutely disgusting to let the big pharmaceutical companies write the medicines laws. It's like putting Adolf Hitler in charge of the British Army in the last war.
You won't get an argument from me there. And you and I have talked about this before, and we've butted heads on different aspects of this. I take a different point of view on certain things, as you know, but you won't get an argument from me there. But I want to get back to these claims that it can cure cancer. I don't have a copy of it here, but I saw bits and pieces of the transcript of your trial. You told Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith that you were toning down the claims that it was a cure for cancer and that you no longer said that GCMAF was a cancer cure. Why did you say that in court if you do believe that it can cure some cancers? Why did you say you were toning down the claims?
No, I didn't say that. You've got to remember, I was under horrific pressure. The MHRA wanted me for a 26-year prison sentence, 14 years in England and 12 years in France, the worst prisons in Europe. You know, I wouldn't last 1 year in French prisons. And of course, I was being prosecuted by 3 lots of European law: the medicines laws, the Proceeds of Crime Act 2013, and of course the Proceeds of Crime Act, they can take away anything anyone possesses just on the words of a bureaucrat. You don't have to go to court. So you can lose your liberty and everything you possess on the word of a bureaucrat, which is what happened to me and thousands of others. The final law was the European arrest warrant. The MHRA called up their even more corrupt opposite numbers in France, Opolisp, and got them to raise 9 false charges against me. And they want me for 2 years, 4 months in pre-trial prison, and then 10 years, a 10-year sentence. So they want to give me, the MHRA want to give me a 26-year sentence to ensure that GCMAF is hidden for another 25 years. That'll be 50 years.
Now, your debt here, in terms of your sentence, has been served. So your legal problems here are over. What rights...
No, they're not. No. 2nd of August, I go for yet another court case. We've got court cases all the time. They never let you go.
Pertaining to what, David? Because if you've been sentenced for go ahead.
Proceeds of crime. They've already closed all our bank accounts, stripped us of every penny we had. I'm now living in someone else's house, and they want to make sure we have absolutely nothing left.
David Noakes is our guest, and for clarification and for fairness, I've got to point out I've known David for many years. Most of the time we've spoken on the radio, it's been about the European Union. But I'm going to be fair here to people who are listening to this who are sceptical. I've got to do my job. There are people who listen to programs like this where I give a platform to people to talk about alternative medicine and alternative cures for various ailments because it's the right thing to do to talk about these things in the absence of any coverage of them in the mainstream media. But there are people who are saying here, look, and they are telling me this on Twitter, guys like David Noakes come along, and he's a businessman, and he was an EU skeptic, and he's a former politician, and all of a sudden he's telling us about GC math, and we read in the papers that David and his wife are making millions out of it, millions of sales, and we read that David is travelling around the world spending £1 million on flights and all the rest of it. And David says that I've seen evidence that it's cured people of cancer and it's treated pancreatic cancer. But where's the evidence? Where are these people? I've not heard from any of these people. Have they come forward? And that's what people are saying to me. Now, you've got a lot of support coming through on Twitter, by the way. I've got to be absolutely clear about it. There are supporters of yours, and I know some of them, and they're saying David Noakes is a good guy, and he's honest here. He believes that this product is a fantastic thing, that it has great implications for human health on this planet. He believes it. There are a lot of people saying that, but there are a lot of people saying, Richie, these snake oil salesmen come along every few years. They've got this wonder cure, yet they charge an arm and a leg for it, and they make millions out of it. And ultimately, where's the proof that it cures cancer? Back to you.
Right, well, that's very simple. There are 150 peer-reviewed scientific research papers published in the world's top scientific journals. Half of them made it through to the American National Library of Medicine, or PubMed. And you can just read those scientific research papers and you will understand that GC-MAF is the cure for cancer. So the journal Neoplasia in 2003, number 126596668, lists 6 attacks on cancer that GC-MAF has. GC-MAF actually has 21 fabulous effects on the body.
How does it work, David? Give us imagine you're talking to a moron. You probably think you are talking to a moron. Imagine you're talking to a moron. Break it down for me very simplistically. How does this naturally occurring protein in the human body, how does it deal or attack or treat tumours and cancerous growths? How does it work exactly?
Well, we'd all be dead already without GC-MAF. We all make between 10,000 and 100,000 cancer cells a day. And the GC-MAF in our bodies gets rid of them every day. But if cancer or 50 other diseases get strong enough, it can send out a poison called nagalase, which prevents the production of GC-MAF. And then the disease becomes chronic. So if it's cancer, the nagalase will effectively kill you because cancer will eventually kill you. And that's how it works. It has 21 fabulous effects in the body, GC-MAF. It is the most powerful protein possibly in the body. And we had 9,000 fabulous results. And if people want to see some of these results, they need to get off their asses, go to the gcmaf.se website and listen to the 12 videos we've got from people.
Hang on a second now. Listeners might say, listen, don't insult us by telling us to get off our arses. Where's the presentations with the people who had incurable cancer, diagnosed by a state oncologist, treated by GC-MAF, then recovered and went back to their oncologist and got the all clear? That's what people tweeting me now and sending me messages today want to see. They want to see testimony on camera from men and women to say, I got in touch with Immunobiotech, I met David, I was given 6 months or a year to live, David's company sent me the product, I took it, and I'm in remission, and my oncologist can't believe it. That's what people want to see. They don't want to be told, get off your arse. They want to see people come forward and say, listen, I used it, it worked for me. Where are they?
I'm sorry, they will have to get off their arse, go to the website and watch the videos themselves. There are videos and there are accounts, about 100 accounts, doing exactly what you say.
So you've got verifiable people on video, people who can be identified,
absolutely.
saying, listen.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, go to YouTube, key in Terry Davis Newman, TERIDAVIS Newman. By the way, we gave away 25% of our product for nothing. We did not make much money. Professor Marco Ruggiero made more money out of us than anyone else. And
Listen, I'm not your enemy. I'm only doing my job. I've got to ask these questions. Like I said before, you and I have a relationship because we've known each other for some time and we've talked politics for years, and people have to understand that. And I like you as a guy, but I've got to do my job. Did you spend £1 million on airplane flights?
No,
you didn't.
No, we ended up without a penny because under the Proceeds of Crime Act 2013. The government took every single penny. We had a balance left in the bank account when they closed us down. That balance was to start new clinics, to fund the 27 staff, to fund the laboratory, to fund the 2 clinics we already had running. We needed money to pay salaries. We didn't have any money in our own personal bank accounts because we were curing people all the time.
So you're saying, so the government says that the company made £7.5 million selling GC MAF. Are you saying that neither you nor Lynn took a salary out of £7.6 million?
Oh no, we got paid, but just a normal salary. You know, Lynn got about 40,000 a year. I got about 60.
I'm not being an arsehole here. You have to understand. I've got to ask these questions, right?
Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
GlaxoSmithKline killed 83,000 people with their drug Avandia.
They did.
Yes, and their chairman got £7 million for 1 year.
For a year,
just salary. That's £7 million just for her every year. We got 7.6 million. Over 6 years, and out of that money, we had to pay for 27 staff, the laboratory every year, the clinics every year, opening new clinics every year. We had colossal expenses. We attended 20 conferences every year, at which we presented our 33 scientific research papers and the results that we had in our clinics.
Yeah. Let me counter that, because you're right to make the comparison between your company and Big Pharma, and I understand why you would make that comparison, and I would if I were in your position. But you've been around the independent media, and you know that people who consume the independent media, they're very vulnerable people, and they expect the likes of David Noakes and the likes of people like me to be far more transparent in their financial dealings than the likes of Big Pharma. Big Pharma is what Big Pharma is. It's an evil empire. It does what it does. And you won't get an argument from me. But people are saying to me, we're not sure that David has been very transparent about where the money was going that was coming in. And they expect people like you to be more open with that. Back to you.
Well, you know, the money came in, most of it went out. I mean, most of the 7.6 million was already spent. There wasn't a vast amount left in the bank account when they closed it. But we produced full sets of financial accounts. They were bang up to date.
And you pay taxes as well.
Were bang up to date. You can get them on the web. If they can't be bothered to look at the accounts, they should not be questioning us.
You are convinced. It might sound like a stupid question, but I've got to reiterate this because it's important. I've got to first of all remind our listeners, David Noakes is on the programme today. I'm glad that David is out of prison, and I'm glad he's back, although his legal problems haven't gone away. David was well known before these problems, but he came to national attention when he was sentenced to prison for selling an unlicensed medical product, and this happened last year. He spent 6 months in jail. It wasn't nice. We'll talk about that a little bit further down the line. And as I said, these legal problems haven't gone away. But you're sticking to your guns. The law is very clear here. I don't like the law. The 1939 Cancer Act, you and I have talked about it before. I don't like it. It says it's illegal to advertise treatment not approved by the state for cancer. It's also illegal to claim that any treatment not sanctioned by the state is in fact viable or works. Now, I think that's tyrannical myself. I really do. But you've carried out all... Sorry, go ahead, David. Go ahead. Jump back in there.
The medicines laws allow the MHRA to throttle any new treatment at birth. And that is why GCMAF didn't come out for 25 years until we put it out. And we treated 9,000 people. We have proved that GCMAF is the cure for cancer the world has been waiting for. And we've written 33 scientific research papers on the results. We've got 100 people on our website who have been cured. So we've done what we set out to do. Now what we need people to do is to go to the website www.mhracorrupt.st, click Parliament Guilty, go to the bottom of the page and send out the 2 letters, one to their local newspaper, don't bother with the nationals, they're all in the pockets of the big pharmaceutical companies, and one to their MP, and ask for GCMAF to be put in the NHS, where it will save 120,000 lives a year. How do we know that? Because we saved 75% of the people in our Lausanne clinic. And there are 160,000 people dying of cancer in England. Well, 75% of that is 120,000. So if we can save 75% of the terminal 4 patients in our clinics, the NHS can do it in their hospital.
So the clinical trials demonstrated that it's effective in 3 out of 4 patients. That was the result, right?
That's the result in our clinics. The results are not quite so good at home, as you'd expect. And in our Guernsey clinic, the results were 89% of terminal stage 4s saved.
So terminal stage 4, these are people who've been told by their oncologist, there's no hope, get your affairs in order. They're finished effectively. And 89% of those people who were treated with GCMAF it was reversed effectively and they survived.
That's right, yeah. So
it's extraordinary, isn't it?
You catch cancer from your surroundings. And, you know, the food you eat, the Wi-Fi you have. So once you've caught cancer, you are likely to catch it again. It's not a problem. You just take another round of GCMAF. But when the MHRA banned GCMAF, about 200 people died. And the MHRA couldn't care less because they kill about 200,000 British people a year. So the people who jump on their hobby horses and say David Noakes isn't wonderful, they shouldn't be pointing their fingers at me. They need to be pointing their fingers at the killers, and the killers are the MHRA.
Now, you're the public face of it in the UK and Europe, and I know because I've asked you this question before, and you've provided me with names, and I know the names are on the website, but where are the qualified scientists? Because I know that you've worked with qualified scientists and microbiologists and biologists. Why aren't they screaming from the rooftops about this? Why not?
Well, our most senior scientist was Professor Marco Ruggiero, MD, who had a team of 10 PhDs at the University of Florence. And he's done about 100 experiments with his team on GCMAF. He asked me if he could leave the university and come and work for us at 20,000 a month. And I agreed because, you know, if you want the best in the world, and he definitely was the best in the world, probably still is, you have to pay for it. And then I had Linda Thayer, a biomedical scientist, who first developed GCMAF and has saved about 400 people in clinics from various diseases and certain death. And so we have a lot of results like that. So the HER2 oncogene, no oncogene has ever been turned off. An oncogene is a mutated gene that pours cancer into your body for the rest of your very short life. 25% of women with breast cancer have the HER2 oncogene. Well, a patient went into Careggi Hospital in Florence, Italy, and she was told she was terminal stage 4. The cancer had invaded her pectoral muscle and was operable, and the biopsy showed that she also had the HER2 oncogene. So she was doubly dead. She had absolutely no hope. She went to our clinic in Lausanne, was treated by Linda Thayer, and for 3 weeks with Goulet, our GC-MAF with olive oil in it. And she went back to the Careggi hospital, and the surgeons were amazed to see that the tumour had shrunk and was now surrounded by pus. Well, that's no big surprise to us. That happens every time. So they just plucked it out. And then they tested her for the HER2 oncogene again, another biopsy, and they were amazed to find that for the first time in human history, the HER2 oncogene was turned off. So they got 4 professionals to sign it into their archives, and we wrote 3 scientific research papers on it, the first of which was published at the Conference of Anti-Cancer Research in Greece in 2014. 5 years later on, that woman is still cancer-free and still as fit as fiddle.
Are some of these people treated, are some of these, and I'm not being sarcastic now when I say miracle cures, I'm not being sarcastic, but are some of these miracle cured people, are they available to be interviewed by people like me?
Yes, but I don't like the word miracle. GC-MAF is a protein. It cures 1.4% of the world's diseases. Just 1.4%.
Yeah. Again, I said, look, miracle is not the ideal term, but people will listen to it, and these are the words which will come into their minds. They will think, oh, it's a miracle. It's because I can't be doing my job if I don't try to speak to some of these people to get them on. I'd like to hear from somebody, not to, jump down their throat and call them a liar. I don't do that. But I want to hear somebody tell me, yes, I was at death's door, Richie. They told me it was all over, and I came across immunobiotech, and I got the product, the naturally occurring protein, and I'm in remission. It's gone away. I need to do that. That's due diligence. I've got to hear from somebody like that, and I'm hoping that you'll facilitate that for me.
Okay, well, there's a girl in London who had, she thought it was CFS, and she had it for 10 years. She spent 3.5 years in bed. It turned out to be Lyme disease, with a blindfold on, with earplugs in her ears, because she couldn't even stand sight or sound. She took Goulet, and in 3 months, she completely recovered. She got out of bed after 3.5 years, and now she's got a job. Yes, you can interview her.
Yeah, I'd like to have her on, yeah.
You've got to remember, we supplied 80 nations around the world.
Yeah.
We have 9,000 fabulous results.
Well, she's not going to be interviewed on any of the regional BBC radio stations, is she, David? So, I mean, for this to get out there...
BBC always lies.
We need to... Yeah, well, you'll have to tell me that.
Always concealed. The BBC goes around with the MHRA and Cancer Research UK, both of whom have big pharmaceutical company directors on the board, and who kill scores of thousands every year by driving people into chemotherapy. But the BBC goes around with them. Now, why is the BBC encouraging people to die when they could be saving 120,000 by telling the truth about GC-MAF?
Well, with respect to the NHS, I think it's unkind and a bit unfair to blame them all. Most people, even the doctors themselves, they only know what they've been taught, David. You know this. They're not evil. Oncologists who work in Manchester and London, they're not evil bastards that are deliberately killing people.
I'm not so sure. I mean,
I don't buy that.
No oncologist will tell you that cancer only eats one thing. And what is that one thing, Richie?
I'm all ears.
Sugar. It's the only thing cancer eats. So the first thing you need to do is to knock sugar out of your diet and knock carbohydrates out, which become sugar in the body. Now, no oncologist will tell you that. And that is worse than negligence. That's awful.
I'm pretty sure. Hang on. Let me interrupt there. I'm pretty sure I've watched this morning with Schofield and Willoughby, and I've watched Good Morning Britain. I'm pretty sure I've heard doctors say to people on those programs, I'm pretty sure I have, that one of the reasons you should avoid a high sugar diet is because it might because it's connected to cancer. I'm pretty sure I've heard that said. I don't think that's been concealed.
Yeah, but if you are a cancer patient, you should not be told by your oncologist, no, there's nothing you can do about diet. There's everything you can do with diet. They are lying. And pretty well every medical board within the Department of Health and the NHS has Big Pharma as a director. Big Pharma has its tentacles throughout the whole of the medical profession. And that's why they don't want to have GCMAF in, because they make $200 billion a year out of chemotherapy.
It was said to me before by, this is true now, but again, I might become guilty of something I've accused other people of doing. I can't substantiate this because I can't betray the man's name. But many years ago, what I would have called a cancer doctor at the time, an oncologist, did tell me, after I did a radio show in Spain about cancer, in which I interviewed a man called Tullio Simoncini, a doctor who was struck off, an oncologist who was struck off actually, for talking about the healing powers of bicarbonate of soda, believe it or not. And he was on my programme talking about this, and we had an argument. I liked him, I liked Tullio, I gave him a bit of a chasing, but he was good and he fought back and we talked and talked. And I finished speaking with him, and I finished my programme, and as I was leaving the studio in Marbella and Talk Radio Europe, there was a phone call. And I would never answer the phone leaving the studio, because you're there all night. It could be somebody who's got, it could be just a listener who's a bit pissed late at night who wants to have a chat with you about something. So I actually picked the phone up, and it was a guy who introduced himself to me, told me who he was, led me to where I could verify who he was. Retired, I think, oncologist, or just about to retire. And he was on holiday in Spain. And he said, Richie, you won't find an oncologist anywhere diagnosed with cancer who takes the chemo. And I said, you're shitting me, right? And he went, Richie, we don't take the chemo. And I said, are you telling me that it doesn't work? And he said, no, it does work, but it doesn't work often enough. And it kills every healthy cell in the area where it's administered. So he said, oncologists themselves diagnosed with cancer are not likely to take the chemo.
I know that.
Yeah. I was at the time. I can't substantiate now by naming the guy, and it wasn't a wind up. But he said, yeah, we wouldn't take it.
Yeah.
Wow.
According to the Journal of Clinical Research, which is a study in 2004 on 71,000 cancer cases, chemotherapy is effective in 2.3% of cases.
Yeah. Jesus.
The Journal of Clinical Oncology. The Journal of Clinical Oncology.
It's funny, people are watching this program called Chernobyl at the moment. It's a brilliant drama about Chernobyl, about the collapse of the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl in 1986, and people are seeing the effects of radiation. And on a smaller scale, that is what chemotherapy is, right? It's injecting life-killing chemicals into your body to go after a tumour.
That's right. It's chemotherapy is a poison. Everyone knows that. But
Jesus.
Actually, GCMAF counters chemotherapy. Professor Marco Ruggiero and his team of 10 PhDs did an experiment with radioactive cadmium and watched how many cells were killed. So he had two petri dishes side by side, one with GCMAF, one without. 75% of the human cells were killed in the petri dish with no GCMAF. Only 5% were killed with GCMAF. So Marco Ruggiero told us to call the Japanese government and get GCMAF into all those firefighters who were going into the Fukushima Japanese nuclear reactors. And Of course, we couldn't get through to anyone. We never can. We can't get a newspaper to tell the truth. The BBC is full of lies. Go to the website abolishthebbc.co.uk and you'll see what they're up to.
Let me just remind our listeners, David Noakes is on the line. David was involved in immunobiotech for a number of years. They were selling GC-MAF, this naturally occurring protein in the human body, which David passionately believes, and I have no doubt that he passionately believes it. So I can respect that. I'm not endorsing it because I don't know, right?
But Richie, you can know. Just read the research papers. Go listen to the people on the gcmaf.se website. You can know in a couple of hours exactly. You can go to the American National Library of Medicine and read half a dozen GC-MAF research papers.
Yeah, but let me explain it. Give me a chance to explain. When I'm saying I don't know, I've read the papers before. You and I have talked about this before. And I know that these people who've endorsed these studies are genuine, what I would call establishment or system scientists, biologists and academics. So I'm not denying that. I'm not trying to muddy the waters here. I'm not the bloody BBC. But I've also got to be balanced. On the other hand, there are people saying that this is not true, that this is nonsense, that it doesn't work, and that, you know, David was claiming that it cured everything from autism to all sorts of things as well, which people, again, you know, mostly on Twitter, people are very supportive of what you've done and are trying to do. But there are also skeptics on Twitter saying, I'm still not convinced, Richie. Why did David go out there and say it's a cure for cancer, it's a cure for autism, it's a cure for this and a cure for that? That threw up a lot of red flags for people.
Right.
I mentioned this earlier.
GC-MAF, we have a list of GC-MAF diseases, 50 diseases that GC-MAF got people between 80 and 100% recovered. It's very simple. So with autism, we would take a non-verbal autistic kid, some of them violent, and within a week, they would be verbal and going back to normal school. And we would do that with Golaic, our GC-MAF, and ultrasound to drive the GC-MAF across the blood-brain.
But you understand,
we
right?
We were successful with 60% of autistic kids.
Yeah, but you understand why people, when they hear that, are sceptical. Again, because of the world we live in. And look, you know this. You and I have been around the block a lot of times. We operate in the alternative media, where for every decent person trying to bring some, I don't want to say truth, but trying to bring some facts to people, there are 99 out of 100 liars, snake oil salesmen, and what I call members of the truth or industrial complex. I'm not impugning what you're saying. I'm saying that people, you can understand why they would be skeptical when, oh, so it cures all cancer and now it cures autism as well. People go, come on, pull the other one, is what people say.
It doesn't cure all cancer. GC-MAF is effective with all tumour cancers, which is 90% of them. It's not good with multiple myeloma or leukemia. It is in the laboratory, but it isn't in humans.
Why not?
We don't know. If we had been left a bit longer with our scientists, we'd probably have found out why. We started out in the first year curing 5% of terminal stage 4s. At the end, we were saving 89% of terminal stage 4s. Do you want to say anything on that? This is Lynn Thayer.
Is this Lynn? Lynn, how you doing? Welcome to the programme. You should have butted in earlier, Lynn. Yes. Welcome, by the way. It's nice to have you on.
It's nice to have you too. It's been interesting listening to the conversation. Now, as a scientist, I was a bit worried about GC-MAF and everything, because I'm a protein scientist anyway. But I've done loads of research over the years with it, both in the laboratories and working with the professors and everything, and seeing the changes it can make, both in the macrophages in the laboratory and the way it actually interacts with the people and the way it makes their tumours change, and especially with the autistic children. I don't get why it works really yet. I'm studying it, but it kind of replaces the endocannabinoid pathway. And I'm going like, how does it do that? But these recoveries are documented. It's not just our company that whatever. I've been talking to other scientists and doing the research, And when you actually see the macrophages, when they've been activated, putting out the pseudopodia, which are their funny legs, if you do dark field microscopy, which I can do, you can actually see all the changes happening. You can see them interacting with the red cells to tell the red cells to do this. It's just an amazing way of looking at the immune system. And each time I see it, I'm just really humbled to be part of it.
And Lynn, just tell me very briefly, can you give our listeners just a little kind of a bio of yourself? What's your background, your academic background?
Well, I actually was a biomedical scientist working for the NHS. But since I've left, I've done quite a few diplomas, and I'm studying dark field microscopy at the moment, which is just amazing. It's a bit harsh, but because it's looking at live cells and everything. And when I was working in the laboratories, I get like really weird ideas on how to do experiments to prove things happening. And I wanted to see what happened to a macrophage once it was activated. So we spent quite a bit of time. So we did sequential video links on what was happening inside the Petri dishes where the macrophages were activated, and actually histology slides, which is what I'm used to, and we could see what was happening. And when I took it down to Italy, I didn't see my professor for a day because they couldn't believe what we had proved, what was happening to GC-MAF activated macrophages.
So they were blown away by it. Why? What didn't they do that they should have done? I mean, if you bring this evidence to them and they go, "Wow, look at this! This is incredible," well, they should take it on, right?
Well, I think because I was privileged to work in the NHS. I had access to lots and lots of bits of information on patients and sequential result accumulation, and I could see things that other people didn't see because I've worked there for 35 years. So I see things from a different point of view. And with GC-MAF and the way it works, I'm just amazed at what it can do. It's a positive thing. It's just a natural protein, but it's in the albumin family. Therefore, it's natural. We use albumin in the transfusion departments if we've got a problem with one of the patients, that sort of thing. So it is a beautiful thing to happen, and it's positive. David's getting a little bit uptight about it, but when you actually work with it in a clinic under a doctor or scientist and you see the results, it is amazing. And I can probably get loads of documentary evidence if you need it.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
We have a video of GC-MAF activating macrophages and killing cancer cells. It's a time-lapse 3-day video. And in 3 days, the GC-MAF kills all the cancer cells. That's on the website. All you have to do is go there and watch it. It'll take 2 minutes of your time.
For both of you to see this, and your testimony is compelling. I mean, it is. It's very compelling testimony. And when you've spoken to me about this, I think we first spoke about it. When did we first speak about this? About 3-4 years ago, about GC-MAF, I think. Again, your passion for what you believed to be happening was compelling. Now, I'm not in any way trying to water that down by, by implying that I don't believe you. I'm not saying that at all. I believe that you absolutely believe what it is you're telling me. And for me, that's 90% of it anyway as a presenter. If the person speaking to me believes what it is they're saying, well...
It doesn't matter what I think. The scientists...
But it matters to me, you see.
The scientists know. The 9,000 patients know. What I think is irrelevant.
Richie, I'm sorry, but I did a presentation in San Diego on GC-MAF. I was the last speaker of the day, which is the worst place to be in because everyone wants to go down to the bar, don't they?
Who did you present to, Lynn? Who did you present the presentation to?
A load of oncologists.
Wow.
And what we were doing was I had to demonstrate, and I was really jet-lagged, was the fact that GC-MAF activated macrophages could do this. And I showed the video that David just mentioned. I showed the histology slides about what was happening and the pseudopodia that's coming out. And also as well, when it came to the end, I said, look, I'm not going to carry on this conversation. We've got to go to the bar and get some coffee or something. And just everybody wanted to know how I did the experiment. They wanted to know the details and everything so they could replicate it, just to make sure that I wasn't telling an untruth.
Of course. So these are oncologists working in, let's call them, national, local, regional hospitals.
These were a lot of scientists as well.
These were scientists as well. So you put on this unbelievable presentation, at least for them. I mean, they're blown away by it. Again, why are they not picking it up and going, right, this is incredible, let's get this news out there? Why?
Well, I don't know, darling, but when I was sorting out my stuff, I knew that on the day that I had to sort some stuff out, 8 autism specialists were arrested.
Is that right?
What do you do? You know, they were only using supplements that I think were legally registered, but it's a little bit of a problem with the big pharmaceutical and stuff like that. And it's a bit harsh because I have to tread very carefully on what I say and what I do. And when I do my presentations, I have to make sure that my documentation is 900% before I even present it.
Well, what I can't understand, Lynn, and you can help me out here, David goes to court. David is taken to court. First of all, the company is basically raided, and I can understand why you guys think that was motivated by the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the country. And maybe you're right. You know, I think it's understandable you would come to that conclusion. This is what really riles me. Why, in David's case, and I was going to put this to David anyway, why in court can you not present that evidence? Now, our listeners will be screaming at me to ask that question. So the judge is saying unlicensed medical products, not proven, dangerous stuff, putting people at risk. Why can't you present this video evidence in a court of law?
Well, I was actually looking at some documentary evidence that I got today, and it's a cease and desist. You're not allowed to do stuff like that. And with me, I'm not allowed to present any medical evidence against myself, either here or in France. I can't have a judge or a jury. It's just the way it is. It's just the way the legal system is. I'm not happy about it, and David's probably going to say a lot more about it, so put your earplugs in.
Well, thanks for jumping in, Lynn. But it's central, even though this guy, Nicholas Lorraine Smith, I shouldn't call him this guy, let's be respectful. Okay. Even though the judge said GC-MAF isn't on trial. Well, it was really, wasn't it? Because, David, you were selling a product to people who had terminal cancer, and you were alleging and claiming, and you had evidence to support your claims that it was working. So if they're going to bring you to court and say you've been doing a bad thing here, unlicensed products and all of that, it's central to that is whether or not the GC-MAF actually works. So how can it not be introduced, that evidence that's on your website? Why can't this happen in a court of law?
My lawyers forced me to plead guilty. They did not I presented my case to them. They did not send it to the prosecution or the judge. So I was stood up in court and I was not allowed to present my case. I had 50 witnesses that I wanted to present. They ruled all of them out. I had a witness, Scott Tipps of the National Health Federation.
I know Scott, yeah.
Yeah, to state that the MHRA and the big pharmaceutical companies are corrupt and that they kill 200,000 a year. I wasn't allowed to have him. I was absolutely kept out of the court case. There's no justice in the EU dictatorship, and we are in the EU dictatorship.
Well, I agree we are, but when you say you were forced to plead guilty and forced to go the way your solicitor wanted you to go, why didn't you dispense with the solicitor and say, no, I'll do it myself? Why not?
Because we were on legal aid. They had taken all our money.
You had no money.
We couldn't pay for solicitors. If we didn't carry on with these guys, we had no one. If I was going to do it myself, I would do it myself, and I would not involve any solicitors.
Do you regret that now, that you didn't say, to hell with the solicitors, I'll represent myself?
Yes, I do regret that.
And so do I.
Because you'd have brought in one of your own scientists, microbiologist, a scientist like Lynn, but not Lynn, obviously. You'd have brought somebody in to say, yeah, I can verify these experiments. I can verify the research. You'd have brought somebody like that in, right?
Yeah, and I would have put it out there, put it on a PDF that they could have taken off my computer, you know?
Yeah.
It's not difficult. It's not difficult for any normal mediocre scientist to do.
Where do you go from here, you and David? I know you've got legal issues pending, and I genuinely regret that, you know. I think...
Well, it's very simple. We're going to French jail to die. I mean, you don't survive a French jail at the age of 66. You know, they are the worst jails in Europe, and there is no justice in France. There's very little left in England now.
So you're talking extradition then? I mean, you have to turn up at a court in France. Is that how it works?
Yes, and I will definitely die there. Lynn probably will as well.
Well, Jesus, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Explain how that works. The French have to apply for extradition. Has that happened already?
Yeah.
Right, so there is a Judge Goddard who is utterly fraudulent. He's come up with 9 charges, none of which we're guilty of. And the whole case has been just already heard in Britain. He wants to hear the whole case again. That's illegal under EU law. You can't be tried twice for the same offence. But actually, the lawyers can do whatever they like. They can break the law left, right and centre. So he will get to try it all again, and he will get to give us 10-year sentences. And the fact that we are innocent really doesn't count for anything in a court of law in Europe.
And of course, in France, it's not going to be possible for either of you to represent yourselves unless you speak French. This is a problem, I suppose. I understand in France, living with a French woman as I do, we've spoken about this before. If you are subject to criminal proceedings in France, you do have the right to represent yourself. That would be very difficult in France because, again, the opportunity to bring expert witnesses to say, look, whatever you might think of the business practices of Mr. Noakes or Lynn, we can testify that the product actually works. That's key here to your futures. Getting people on the record. I don't like
this stuff about my business practices.
Oh no, listen.
25% of our product are waste free. We saved a lot of lives. We are not interested in people who want to take chemotherapy. We only want.
I wasn't having a pop at you there.
To save their own lives.
I wasn't having a pop at you.
We did not sell it. People came to us as a result of recommendations for others. We didn't do any sales or marketing. We just accepted orders from people who got recommended to us from others.
It's a really hard one for people listening to this show. I mean,
it's a very.
No, let me explain what I mean by that. The vast majority of people tweeting the program know a bit about the story. They're not stupid. They're independent thinkers, and the vast majority of them, I can be honest here, are very sympathetic to both of you and are very sympathetic to the idea that GC-MAF is a hugely successful treatment for cancer. So the vast majority of people are on your side. I'm not supposed to be on anybody's side. Like I said before, I like you. I've known you the best part of 10 years since you came on my programs. I've just got to do my job and put the other side of it. I wasn't having a pop when I said business practices. I'm not suggesting that your business practices were dodgy. I'm just nodding to the British court case and what was said in court. I'm saying forget all of that. Let's get somebody in court to say, well, listen, I have reviewed the research, peer-reviewed research, and I can say categorically that it has been as successful as Mr. Noakes is saying. That's central to your future, that in a court of law somewhere, whether it's France or here or wherever.
Okay, well, we employed 4 scientists. They will all attest. There were 10 scientists, PhDs, at the University of Florence. We worked very closely with them. They'll all attest to it. There are 300 scientists who've written scientific research papers on GC-MAF. They know exactly what GC-MAF is.
You're up against, as you said yourself, the biggest companies on planet Earth, and you're up against a violently corrupt media in this country and around the world. This is the sickening thing, because when the media covered your trial, I often give lectures on how the media works because I've worked at every level of it. And one of the points I made when talking about you while you were going through the trial, I talked about you in my monologues. One of the points I made was look at this, the way this is going on. The media are more concerned about figures of millions of pounds. They're more concerned about whether the man spent money on airplanes travelling around Europe. What the media is not doing is trying to get to the bottom of whether the product works or not. That's the sickening thing about the landscape that we inhabit, about the paradigm we exist in. The media should be all over it in terms of speaking to people who have reviewed the research, the scientists you mentioned, interviewing the men and women that you say were at death's door but then came back and went into remission. That's what the media should be doing. Even if the media is sceptical and wants to disprove it, it's what it should do, but it doesn't. And it's horrendous, is what it is, right? But where does that leave you then? Because you can talk to guys like me all night. I've got a very healthy audience, but most of the audience are sympathetic anyway. How are you going to get this information to Joe Smith and Sally Murphy in Salford? How are they going to hear about this?
Go to MHRA Corrupt, click Parliament Guilty, scroll down to the bottom of the page, send one letter to your MP and one letter to the local press. If enough people do that, GC Math may get into the NHS, and then 120,000 lives a year will be saved, and that's all we care about.
I'll give you I know that sounded very much like a final word, but I'm going to give you the final word again anyway. Look, I sincerely wish you the very best, and my word means something. You know, I don't believe you should have went to prison. I'm fascinated by the stories I've heard about GC Math. I'm fascinated by what happened to Jeff Bradstreet and other anomalous and crazy, weird and wonderful disappearances and deaths of people dying, you know, who've been talking about this and looking into it. It's no joke, it's really happened. I want to know. I want people to honestly meet with you and say, right, let's take a look at this information, this research, and have a go at it. That's where I come from. I believe you're decent, fundamentally. I've known you for years. We've talked about the European Union for many years, and I can feel your passion, and Lynn's as well. I hope that you don't end up in prison in France. I hope that nothing like that happens to you. I'll give you both the final word on it, if you want to have a final word each on it. And then for today anyway, we'll leave it there. But thanks for coming on the programme again. I'll give you the final word.
Thanks very much, Richie, for having us. Well, Parliament has killed 2 million people since GC Math was discovered in the 1980s. And they did that by backing the big pharmaceutical companies and the MHRA, who kill 200,000 a year on their own. Parliament is guilty.
Okay, I'd just like to say thank you for everybody for listening. The immune system is an amazing piece of kit. GC Math is just one of the pieces of it. And I am proud to have been working with it for 8 years. And I'm proud of the recoveries that I've seen from people that other doctors have written off. You can't take a lady into your place at home, give them 2 weeks to live, and let her live 10 years longer. I'm sorry, but that can't happen, but it's happened, and I'm just so proud that I've been able to do it. And it's down to GC Math and the immune system, so thank you.
Not at all. Listen, it's good to have you both on, and I meant when I said I wish you very well, and you know you're welcome back anytime on the programme. When there's any news, good, hopefully good, and not bad, but any news, drop us a line and come back on and chat with us. David, just finally from you, there's been an enormous amount of tweets, you'll see them on Twitter yourself, to contact you about this, people affected by it. What's the best way to reach you now? I know you've given website details already.
Okay, my email is dn@help.vg, Victor Golf.
So that's DN, that's obviously David Noakes, Delta November. Say again.
At help, HELP.VG, Victor Golf.
At help.Victor Golf. Mate, thanks very much. All the best, David, and to you, Lynn, as well. That was David Noakes then, the former, I think, I don't know if I should say co-founder, but he was an executive with Immunobiotech, and he was sentenced to over a year in prison for selling GC Math. Spent 6 months in jail, came out of jail recently, and he believes, to his bones, I think, And he's put all this research online that he believes proves that this product, which is not a chemical, but in fact is a naturally occurring protein in the human body, does work at least 3 out of 4 times, as he said earlier on, in treating stage 4 cancers. He says it doesn't work so well with leukemia. I do remember him saying that to me a few minutes ago, but it does have a very, very quick effect on treating cancer in the body. He believes that the reason for basically invading his company, seizing the assets of the company and freezing them, confiscating the money, was motivated by the desire of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world to prevent people from finding out that there are other ways of treating cancer than chemotherapy. But as I mentioned earlier, and I must have said this 1,000 times over the last 10 years, talking about this, in this country, because of the 1939 Cancer Act, it is illegal to advertise any cancer treatment or to claim that something is a treatment or a cure for cancer unless it is approved by the state. And it is taken very seriously that. David Noakes is not the first person to fall foul of the 1939 Cancer Act. So there were plenty of tweets on it. Let me read a few tweets. And I'll read a few tweets, and then I'm gonna do one, as the term goes. I'm gonna do one. I'm gonna love you and leave you. It's not the full 2 hours today, but you live. I did 55 minutes on YouTube this morning. I'll be back on YouTube tomorrow at 9:30 with Thursday's early morning newspaper review. So join me on YouTube, by the way, tomorrow morning. A British Bulldog tweets, Richie, the effectiveness of a drug is not relevant to determining whether it was properly licensed. No court would hear that evidence, says British Bulldog there. Thank you. Where can we contact David? He's already given that. That's dn@help.vg. That's Delta November @help.victorgolf, right? If you want to drop him a line. Tiger says, I've had radiotherapy, chemotherapy and surgery in the past. I'm currently treating lung cancer with bicarbonate of soda, vitamin C, artesunate. Is that how you pronounce that? Artesunate or artesunate? My doctor's own formula, mitochondria via IV. I'm also using CBD oil in the protocol, and I've eliminated sugar from my diet as well. Why is the government stopping me from taking GC-MAF? It's my human right to do what I want to my own body. Yet they want me to force vaccinate, or they want me to vaccinate my children. I don't want to vaccinate my children. We should have our own right to choose. Why is there such a regulator? Thank you. Hi to Susan as well. David tweets, whether it works or not is irrelevant. It's unlicensed, ergo illegal. Should have sold it as plant food, says David. The legal high manufacturers get away with doing that. Hi to Cocabelle as well. These are the damned tweets. When I lost my aunt back in in December, I sat and read the research papers David talks about. I handed them to my cousin's wife, who's a Marie Curie nurse, and she dismissed them without even reading a single page. Ignorance, again, killing humanity, tweets as these are the damned. Number of people have tweeted that David should abscond from the country. Look, I don't have any opinion on that. What I would say is, judging by what he's told us, his finances are basically crippled. So absconding and going to South America might not be as easy as it sounds for him. As I said, a lot of tweets came in on this. Mostly supportive, I have to say, of David Noakes and of Lynn there. To see what people tweet me, go to twitter.com. Where it says search Twitter, just put Richie Allen Show in all one word and press enter, and you'll see what people are tweeting me. Kelly in Ireland. How you doing, Kelly? Great chat with David. You're giving him a right grilling, says Kelly. Well, I wasn't giving him a right grilling, Kelly. I was just doing my job. That's your job, you see. And it's better for David. I've said this before. If you're going to get involved in interviewing people, if you're going to throw your hat into the independent media ring, You've got to ask people questions. You've not got to sit there with them and nod along and sympathise. It does nobody any good, least of all David Noakes himself, right? Right. Martin in Spain, who's talked on this programme about his own issues with cancer before. Thanks for the tweet. Keith Daly tweets, Richie, my mother's oncologist said the same thing, that he or she would not have chemotherapy. I nearly lost my mind. And only then even, did she decide to say you need to keep a balanced diet. I mentioned that some years ago an oncologist rang up or phoned up the evening programme I was presenting in Spain, gave me a name to verify himself. I was able to verify very quickly online. I said, I'm on holiday here, I've got a villa over here, as you would do if you're an oncologist. They earn quite well, don't you know? And he said to me, I wouldn't have the chemo. Wouldn't have it, he said. And I said, why? And he said, because it doesn't work very often, is how he put it. David Noakes was right. It works in less than 5% of the cases that have been researched. It kills healthy cells in the body. Basically turns you inside out, basically, chemo. And this guy said to me, I'm an oncologist and I wouldn't give it to myself, Richie. That's a true story. So look, that's about it then. Charisse is listening to the programme. How are you doing, Charisse? And has mentioned Dr. Bradstreet, which we mentioned in the conversation there. Dean Smith says, Richie, that's the question. But when the system shuts you down, you are getting there. So Dean believes David Noakes is onto something because the system seems to be shutting him down. But yes, where are the people cured? Where are the people he's cured? I believe there is truth in what he's done. But he said he will provide me with guests, with spokesmen and women who have treated their cancers with GCMAF and have had success, and we will get them on the programme. He said he would provide those people to me. When he does, I will bring them on, and not to grill them or to insult them, but to ask them to tell me their story. And then you will make your own mind up as to whether you believe them or not. That's how it works. All right. I'm no Jeremy Paxman, but I'm also no truther industrial complex lackey. It's your job to ask questions. And I asked David Noakes the right questions. Whether he gave the right answers is not for me to say. It's for you to say. Right, we're going to leave it there for this evening. Thanks for listening, as usual. We'll be back tomorrow where none other than Neil Sanders of Neil Sanders Mind Control will be on the programme talking about the rise and rise and rise of Nigel Farage. You don't want to miss that. It's going to be fascinating. Neil Sanders on the programme tomorrow. I will have another guest as well. In the meantime, I'm off to put this programme on YouTube and Podomatic. But I'm also going to watch the Europa League final between Chelsea and Arsenal. I'm going to chill out with a soft drink or two and watch the foosball, is what I'm going to do. Thanks to David Noakes, my guest, and to Lynn, his partner, the scientist whom he's worked with. Wish him all the best. This is Rod Stewart closing out the Richie Allen Show for Wednesday, May 29th, 2019. I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30 on YouTube with the paper review. Bye now. Bye now.